Ja, velkommen tilbage, og hvis nu du har lyst til at få oversat fra engelsk til dansk, så kan du gå derud og finde nogle hørebøffer og tage dem på, og så vil det hele blive oversat.
Thank you. Well, it is fantastic to be here. I don't quite know who Hella was talking about, but I don't think she's been able to come, so you've got me instead. She sounds amazing, and I don't think that's quite me, but it's really good to be here. And this is my first time in Copenhagen, and I really like it. I really like it. And I'm just getting used to the traffic going different ways and the bikes, and I nearly ended up in a basket of a bike the other day, but I hope that wasn't you. But it's just, yeah, and of course the weather as well has been fantastic. But I have to say, the thing that is most amazing and I've absolutely loved is the Danish pastries. To me, this is the home of the Danish pastry, and it's just been a joy. I think I had a sample of about 4 this morning and actually feel quite sick for the rest of the day, but honestly the chocolate and so great. The language is quite complicated, but I decided that, you know, being at a Christian conference, I needed to learn at least something that will be relevant. And so I've been, you know, kind of thinking about this, and giv mig en bazar. Bazar. Giv mig en bazar. No, bazar. Bazar. Is that it? Have I just said something rude, or is that good? In other words, give me a pastry and I'll be happy, kind of thing, yeah. Okay, well, I'm married to Tom, and Tom's been coming here for a long time and been trying to persuade me to come, and I'm just a bit of a homie, really, but I'd say just loved it. And we've been married for 31 years and still like each other, which I think is amazing. And yeah, it's good. And we've got 4 grown-up daughters, and we fostered for the last 10 years, so we've had 17 young people through our home. And so, as I said at the conference the other day, for those of you that were there, I'm becoming an empty nester. Do you understand empty nester? So all my kids have gone, and the dog left home recently, and so I just feel I'm really entitled to a midlife crisis. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I have got the tattoo, which I'm really proud of. Woo. So yeah, watch this space. I'm kind of ready to, I don't know, jump out of an aeroplane or something, but we'll see. Okay, well, Tom didn't tell me I was speaking today until about 4-5 days ago, so we had a big row about it, and I was like, you didn't tell me that, and all that. Anyway, so I kind of thought, oh Lord, what am I going to do? And I actually don't speak that often, so I haven't got a great repertoire of talks, and when I talk, I just love to talk about compassion, so I'm a bit kind of samey. And anyway, but I'd got one, and that was great. And then I woke up this morning, which is kind of, well, I do wake up every morning, but unlike me in the sense of I woke up and I felt like God say, you need to probably scrap that and do something else. And I was like, oh no, that's not me, that's, you know. So I'm going to give you the choice, basically. You can either go for a well-crafted talk with 4 points. It will be okay, be reasonable, but it will be like safe. That's the safe talk. Or we can go for something I made notes on in Tom's sermon this morning, and not about his sermon, and it's like this, which will be more... Okay, we'll commit to that then. Oh, crumbs, now I am scared. Now I'm like, right, Lord, do you really deliver on what you say in our weakness and all that? Okay, well, I did. I woke up this morning and I was like, Lord, what is it? And I was just thinking about the story that we're all in. All of us here, you know, behind every face, they'll not hide, but there'll be like great things going on, difficult things, there'll be challenges, there'll be joys, there'll be sadnesses, there'll be all kinds of things going on. And often we come into church, which is a fantastic community, and honestly, this church is brilliant, let me tell you. We come in and you know, it's right, we're smiley, we're positive, we're thankful to God, and yet often in our day-to-day lives, stuff's going on. And it might just be me, but I find it quite hard to be a Christian sometimes. Is that just me? Anybody else find it like a challenge? You know, it is, isn't it? And so I just started thinking about a story and thinking often when we're in the middle of our bit of story, we don't know how it's going to end. We're like, where are we going to get to? How's this going to end? you know, it's not okay, or maybe it's great, but life has a way of kind of, well, it's uncertain, isn't it? It's uncertain at the end of the day. And I was just started thinking about a story, and we all have a story, and just getting you to think where you are in your bit of your story, and it will all be completely different. And I guess for me, being 51 years old now, so I'm getting old, which is terrifying. And I was thinking, I'm probably further along in my journey than most of you here. So I kind of feel like I've probably learned a few things along the way. And the great thing with someone like me is I'm so ordinary. I mean, so ordinary, and I'm amazed at what God can do in somebody so ordinary. Not that I've done anything spectacular, because I haven't, but just how us choosing to choose Jesus and being filled with his Holy Spirit, it is definitely the best story to live in. It doesn't mean life's simple. It doesn't mean it all goes our way, but it is the best story to live in. So I guess I just wanted to share a bit of my story, and then kind of just unpack maybe kind of, I haven't worked it out, as you can see, exactly how it's going to come out, but kind of unpack a bit some of the life lessons that I think probably will apply to all of us in a room like this. So I was thinking about, you know, if life's like a play, you know, and kind of we're on the stage doing this stuff, what is the stage? And I thought, the truth is, it's an everyday, ordinary life. And so of course, Romans 12, and I woke up thinking about this morning. So it is from the Message, because I just find that so easy to kind of take on board. So I think it's going to come up on the screens, and it says this, Romans 12. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You will be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it, unlike the culture around you always dragging you down to its level of immaturity. God brings the best out of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. I'm speaking to you out of deep gratitude for all that God has given me, and especially as I have responsibilities in relation to you. This is Paul writing this. Living then, as every one of you does, in pure grace. It's important that you do not misinterpret yourselves as people who are bringing this goodness to God. No, God brings it all to you. The only accurate way to understand ourselves is by what God is and by what he does for us, and not by what we are and what we do for him. In this way, we're all like various parts of a human body. Each part gets its meaning from the body as a whole, not the other way around. The body we're talking about is Christ's body of chosen people. Each of us finds our meaning and function as a part of his body. But a chopped off finger or a cut off toe, we wouldn't amount to much, would we? So since we find ourselves fashioned into all these excellently formed and marvellously functioning parts in Christ's body, let us go ahead and be what we were made to be, without enviously or pridefully comparing ourselves with each other or trying to be something we aren't. And there's just so much practical, everyday advice in there, isn't there? So if it's everyday life, ordinary life, that we get to kind of do being a Christian, following Jesus in, there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. It's not going to be glamorous most of the time, maybe occasionally, and sometimes it will be dramatic, but most of it will be everyday, ordinary. And yet I'm aware so often that it's the choices we make in those small moments of the everyday that actually shape our future. And that's a tough one. We can't control everything that happens in our lives, nor are we meant to. But we can make choices, good choices, and not so good choices at times. For me, I grew up in a very, a very Christian home. I look back and I'm so, so grateful, but probably for the first 20 years of my life, I wasn't. As a young age, we were a church family, and I have to say, at the age of 7, I definitely had an encounter with Jesus. Really simple, a child just praying. So I never had any kind of doubt that Jesus existed. But then as I grew into my teens, I just found that I hated what I felt like was the religious side. So we had to go to church. Every Sunday morning I was dragged out of bed and, in my mind, forced to church. And we had a house where on the front door we had a Jesus loves you sticker, which quite honestly was a massive cringe when your friends came around. And on the back of the toilet we had I forgot what the calendar's called. Anyway, it's got a certain name with little text written, and then you rip it off, and then the next, So you'd sit in the toilet and get it, and the front door, and then round the house we had, plaques, and as for me, my house, and all that. And growing up, it was just a pain. I was, just being honest. To be honest, I was a really nervous, anxious, young person. My mum had lots of depression, so I remember I never knew what mood she was going to be in. So I was always kind of a bit nervous to come home. And if she was in a good place, that was fine. If she wasn't, so I learned from a young age to be useful. If I'm useful, I'll be loved. That was always my kind of narrative growing up. My dad was a social worker, and he had a really interesting job in child protection. So quite often I'd end up going out with him when he was on call. And I honestly look back and think that was quite moments in my life when probably, even at a young age, I was being exposed to the poor and those who were struggling, and what that looked like and smelt like, and what it heard, I could hear, kind of thing. So it was probably an influence. And again, isn't it interesting how the little things in life influence you as you're growing up? And so at the age of 17, I finally got to leave home, and I went off to do my nurse training. And again, completely terrified and nervous, and didn't know what or how, But I remember leaving thinking, I can finally now escape God. So it felt good. And for a little while, except as I got into more and more mischief, not major stuff, but, things teenagers do or did then, probably not as bad as now. I remember always sensing that God was with me, even when I was doing things I knew were naughty. And I always felt like he was there. He was like, I'm with you, I love you, I'm here. And it was really annoying because in my head, I just thought, I think I always thought God as a judge. It's about rules, and you have to obey, and you have to get it right. And so suddenly to be experiencing what felt like God's grace and kindness and love for the first time, I actually found it really hard, because I thought I'd rather know the angry God. That makes sense to me. I can deal with him, but a God that loves me and allows me to make mistakes and is gracious, and so the more I kind of went on, I'm like, do you know what, I can't escape him. I don't actually want to escape him. If this is what faith and following Jesus is, I actually am in. And then I was 19, and I used to come back to Nottingham most weekends from doing my nursing when I could, and used to hang out with my friends and go to the pub and all that kind of stuff. And then one particular evening, I'm sat on the stairs at a party, and this guy called Tom walks past. So I'm like, oh, hello, I'm Helen. And he was like, oh, hello, I'm Tom. Not actually that deep, but, And anyway, we got chatting, and I just thought, I really fancy him. He's really nice. And he was a youth worker, and I was a nurse, and that was all nice. Anyway, then he disappeared off. And so I thought, oh, that's a shame. I felt like a connection with him. Anyway, that was it. A few weeks later, I'm in church in the centre of Nottingham. It's an old Anglican church. And it was a big service, and they'd put extra chairs out. And whoever was sat behind me kept banging their knees into my back. So that was irritating, of course. And anyway, I turned round, and it was Tom. So I was like, oh, my goodness, didn't we met at that party, do you remember? And he was like, yeah. And he was, a bit embarrassed. And he's so not, he's a very extrovert kind of person. So I just said, oh, it'd be great to go out for a drink sometime, which, again, was completely unlike me. Anyway, the following week, we met up for a drink, and he was so nervous that he brought a friend with him. I also remember him having, leather trousers, and it kind of I have to say, it slightly put me off, but anyway, So I think the thing is, for me, I was really shocked he was a Christian, and I'm like, a Christian that I actually fancy. That, interesting, that's really good, never expected that. And so, cut a long story short, really, he basically proposed to me about 2 weeks later. I know. I know. And, I think it was my rebellion. Kind of like, because it was so unlike me and so kind of, and I was just obsessed with him. When you first meet someone, how much, you can think, he's just so gorgeous. And so I just was like, yes. In fact, I didn't propose. Sorry, I stand corrected. He said to me, I asked him what he was thinking. He was sat there and he took ages to tell me. I said, what are you thinking? He said, well, I was just thinking, would you have my children? So I did take that as a proposal, which is right, women, isn't it? If someone's asking, yeah. Anyway, so I just said, yes, I would. And he was like, yeah, let's get married. So that was kind of helpful. And so we did. And, so I've told you where I'm going now. But so basically, within 12 weeks, we got married. And then suddenly, the reality, we didn't actually know each other at all. So it was quite an adventure and amazing actually how God brought us together. And I think I just thought, I've met a Christian, I fancy him, he wants my babies, let's go for it. And so it was kind of as simple as that, or a bit too simple really. But no, I truly believe that, again, you look back and you think, in the middle of it all, it was like, this is crazy, but how you look back and think, no, this was so the Lord, he so planned it all. And it wasn't even out of me being in a perfect and wonderful, place. It's just, and neither was he. And amazing. And when we met, I can honestly say we were on the edge of church, really. Although we're passionate about Jesus, that no doubt there. But we were on the edge of church in the sense of like, we were cross with it, frustrated. He was from a Catholic background. So I think for me, he brought such freedom because I didn't know many Catholics, but he didn't seem to have any rules at all. So that was a whole new thing. I don't know if that's a normal thing, but he was, So that was very refreshing for me. And so we kind of met in that place of like wanting to follow Jesus. Church wasn't really relevant. And then quite quickly we kind of wanted to make a difference. We were like, thought we were all it. I was 20, Tom was a bit older, and we were just like, we're all it. And I remember we were invited to run a house for 7 homeless young people. And I was doing my nurse training. I'd transferred back to Nottingham, and what a crazy thing to do. We've been married, a month. And we went off to run this house for 7 homeless people. I put the few wedding presents I got, I put in the house, and we had 6 months of, pure hell. But I kind of look back and think again, it was probably a really stupid thing to do. But, I think God's really kind again. He saw our heart, he saw our passion, and he kind of allowed it to happen. And we did learn so much living in that house. But after 6 months, we completely burnt out and just had to get out. So it was a great experience, but kind of a crazy thing. And then we ended up I had a baby, had Katie, our first daughter, which was amazing, and kind of had a couple of years. We went off to live in Birmingham and just did some different things. It was a real quiet time in life, really, of just doing life, I guess. You have some seasons when it almost feels not flatlining, but just doing life. And then I was desperate to come back home, so I was thinking, it'd be so good to come back to Nottingham. All my family are there. And it felt hard because we had sort of this 3 years of being completely away. And again, I look back and I think God was just shaping us and really helping us invest in each other, bearing in mind we still hardly knew each other, and our family and being established as parents. I remember that time we were completely broke. Tom had gone back to study. I think I'd had another baby by then, and we were skint. And it was a really, really hard time, to the point that we had to have food parcels from his mum, which was like through gritted teeth for me. But and it was just a really hard time. But again, it was just having to get on with life, getting on with life, building resilience and character, and just moving forward. But I always had a desire to come back to Nottingham, to be in my family. And then it was amazing. Before we moved back, Tom just felt like he went on a silent retreat. He'd been offered a job in Nottingham, but it was going to be paid next to nothing. So we really had to seek God about doing that. And I remember Tom said, I really feel it's right. And I said, well, Tom, we had quite a lot of debt at the time. We had about £5,000, which is, I don't know, millions, probably kroners or whatever's here. But anyway, we just had, and we were like, I said, like, Tom, money just doesn't turn up like that. And it was kind of some foolish decisions why we got into that debt. And so, all this going on. And But anyway, what happened was that Tom went off to the silent retreat, which is a hysterical thought in itself, because Tom and silence doesn't quite go together. But he managed that. And but anyway, while he was there, the place that offered us the job was called the Potter's House. And he went to the retreat and he opened up the Bible for the daily reading, and it was Jeremiah 18 at the Potter's House. So he was like, oh my goodness. Same time, I'm back home, and an envelope comes through the letterbox, and it was a cheque for £5,000. So I'm like, is it to the charity that Tom was currently working for? No, it was to us, with a letter just saying, and it was from a couple we'd met once. We'd never discussed finances. They felt God had asked them to give us this money to do with housing, and they'd been obedient. So it's like all these dots that kind of connect up. And so actually it meant we could go and do that. And so we willingly and happily moved back to Nottingham, and it was a great just to be back with my family. It wasn't long after that Tom particularly had a strong sense of call that we were coming to a time where he had dreams, different things that really felt a call to ministry, you know. And again, in that context, it was being a vicar, which is like an Anglican Church of England. I don't know if you have equivalent here. And interestingly, looking back, I secretly felt called as well, but I don't know, it was the structure of the church or back then, but it was all about Tom. So Tom had to go to like the interviews and the panels and the weekends away. And quite honestly, I was like, oh, that's great, because I just didn't see myself as being able to kind of really acknowledge that call that God had put in my heart. Which was interesting. But anyway, so Tom went off and did all these different things, and we really felt excited. And I just thought, I'm going to be such a good vicar's wife, and I'm going to have my nice little parish, and they have nice churches with, what's it called? Steeples. And I was going to have a nice vicarage. And I thought, I'm sure I can learn to, do flowers. I think that's what vicar's wives do. I wasn't quite sure. And I'm sure I can make a few sandwiches for the afternoon tea or whatever it was. And I was thinking, yeah, that'd be my role. That I'm a woman. That's what I need to do. Not, but I was trying to get into it. Anyway, so I was actually quite excited and thought, yeah, Tom will be a great vicar. And anyway, we go through this process, and it's 2 years, and it's like everything you give to it. We're at the local church, and we're like being promoted. Tom's preaching and leading the prayers, and I, I think I was doing kids' work probably. But anyway, we were kind of like, which is great. We were just involved, really involved. And it was like, yes, God has spoken to us. We know what we're doing. We're going to be vicars. And that's, it's going to be great. We have found the call on our life. Finally, we know what we're about. And really, really good. And then it was the final weekend. He had to go to panel. And he came back and he said, oh, yeah, I'm so in. I'm so got this sorted. Oh, great, exciting. And then we got the letter about 2 weeks later. And we opened it excitedly. And it said, no. Absolutely not. And don't even think about coming back. It's a no. You will not make a vicar. So it's like, oh. And then this guy, this one of the kind of board had to come round and sit down and talk to us and say why he didn't get in. And it was probably the first time in our lives, and Tom must have been probably 20, late 20s, I can't remember, but that someone actually challenged behaviours. And it was deeply painful, particularly for me as a wife, having to listen, because I hadn't been involved, so I'd been spared. But it was, so Tom kind of took quite a battering. But actually, again, looking through the kind of mirror back, I was so grateful, so grateful. If anyone ever speaks into your life and it's out of love and because they really care about you, do you know what? The best thing is receive it. And I remember when the guy was talking, Tom... I hope it's all right me saying all this on your behalf, but was trying to kind of justify it. And I remember just saying, just be quiet, just take it. We've got to just take this on the chin. And it was the hardest thing, but one of the most profound things that God did in us having to actually address some stuff. And so it was painful, but so good. And then I remember it was a really interesting season. And again, God often takes us through these seasons in our life, and it doesn't make sense at the time. But then later it does, and it's like holding on for the later without going to pieces. And I remember at the same time, I think I had a miscarriage a couple of months later, which was really sad. And then Tom's sister, who was only 30-something, got breast cancer, and she got a little baby of a few months old, and she died. And it's like everything was just taken away. And we had nothing. We felt like we had no future. We felt like things that maybe would have given us a future, having another baby would have been great. That had gone for that time. And then the death death. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And Tom was just feeling really low. And I remember looking out the kitchen window one day and saying, well, Lord, you know, we're still up for anything. We'll do anything. What, you know, we're available. I mean, that's all I know. And I don't understand it all. And I remember I just felt like God say, if you want to know what it really means to serve me, go and live with the poor. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I remember saying to Tom, I think God's speaking. And for me, this was, again, a real catalyst of Tom having to kind of like dealing with his stuff. And it was almost like that was the beginning of something in me as a woman, as a yes, a married woman, but as an individual in my own right, with God's call over my life, waking up to, I can hear from God too. I can activate what God's saying as much as any man can. And I know that you're probably already in that place, but for me, that was quite a challenge and quite a step out for me. And so I remember like saying, Tom, I think God's calling us to move. And he said, well, I don't hear from God. Do whatever. So I was like, right, I will. So I got the house on the market and I knew exactly the street. And it was a street that was a real social housing, a dumping ground for like all kind, you know, whether alcoholics, drug addicts, domestic violence, ex-prisoners, you name it. It was a crazy, crazy street. And so we moved up there. And again, when we moved, I thought it was about what we were going to do. We were going to change the street and change the world. And actually, God did amazing things years later there. But I remember when we moved in and I was like, right, God, I'm ready to take the mission field. I felt like God say, just love the people and pray. Oh, okay. And we did. That's exactly what we did. And we fell in love with that street in quite a broken place. I mean, we were still at our little local church, Church of England, and suddenly, because we didn't get through to be the vicar, you know, college, whatever, Tom no longer was preaching or leading. Everything was taken away. It was really awkward. But saying that, we ran an amazing youth group, and that was just fantastic. And we did church cleaning, and we just everything died. Everything died. But again, at the time, it was horrendous, but I look back and think it was the most precious time in our lives because we stopped. We stopped striving. We stopped trying to, find identity and validation in what we did and how good we looked to our families and on. And it was just like we just died and we just lived on this vulnerable, broken street, same as everybody else. We were all in the same boat. We were loved on. We loved the guys, and it was an incredibly sweet time. And, again, looking back, that was the beginning, I'll finish the story later, but of 7 years from Tom being called to kind of God fulfilling something, of us just being. And I want to encourage all of us here, because I'm sure there'll be another season for us, because these things kind of go round, because we have to keep learning, that God is in the waiting. He really is in the waiting. And I think sometimes we live in a culture that we have to decide what we're doing and how we're doing it and when and what's the path. And I get all of that. And for some people, it works like that. But for when there's times of God giving waiting, it's so important, if we can, to rest with it, to really trust him in that. I also look back, and that time was a time that God was preparing us. And I didn't know what for, but he was preparing us. And again, we had to just submit, just let go and let God do that. It was out of pain and brokenness that we reached a new level of dependence and just roots just going deeper over that time. And again, I can only say that looking back. At the time, it was like one day at a time, one day at a time. But we had a choice to get bitter or better. And it's in those times, the other thing I've learned, a little life lesson, do we run towards Jesus or run away? And you might say, well, of course you run towards him. But when you're going through hard times, maybe it's just me, I have this like decision to make. Part of me wants just to run away and go, God, you've allowed this, I'm cross, I'm upset, I'm angry. But recently, more and more, I'm learning to run towards him. And that is when we can just know his presence, his comfort, his reassurance, he carries us. It really is a reality. So we had this season of just, being healed and restored, and it was actually a wonderful time of life. And then John and Debbie, who we'd known for years before, out the blue, we hadn't seen them for probably about 10 years, we got a phone call, and it was John, and he just said, oh, hi. And I was like, oh, John, amazing. Hi, how are you? And he said, we're coming back to Nottingham. We're going to plant a church. I said, oh, that sounds really interesting. And I said, oh, well, maybe you should come around for dinner. And I was a bit nervous. I think Tom mentioned this the other night, but I was nervous because John and Debbie were like really proper posh from London. And we were now living on a really chavvy, like a really rough estate. And we'd got like 4 kids by now. So, and I was only, 20 something. So I felt like we were like the inner city true family, and here's John and Debbie from London, and all very. But I thought, oh, anyway. But I still invited. I said, oh, you must come round. Anyway, they came round, and Debbie in her high heels because she's incredibly glamorous and beautiful. And anyway, they came in to our chaos. But what I loved is that as soon as we started talking, it's like we just connected straight away. And I remember like. Tom and I described to them like, well, this is what's, we wish church could be X, Y, Z. We know it can't, but so we're really committed to our local church. And we wished them well as they described the vision they wanted to build in Nottingham. And we went, well, we hope it goes really well. It sounds great. And off they went, and it'd be great to hang out occasionally. And I remember saying to Tom, do you know, I think we should at least pray and say to God, does he want us to be involved in this new church plant? And Tom said, oh, okay. I said, I know God doesn't want us, but it'd be nice, just polite to pray. Anyway, so I remember just saying, Lord, and as soon as I started praying, it was like, oh my goodness, it's like my chest was tight. I was like full. I was like, I was going to explode. And again, I thought, wow, we've had years and years just in the desert, really. Preparation, I was talking about, waiting time, just quite plodding along. And suddenly it was like God just kind of filled us afresh with like vision and excitement. And we couldn't help ourselves. So we were like, we've got to do it. And so we did. And so we were part of the very first meeting at Trent. And I won't get into this, but it was amazing once Trent started, how suddenly on our street, honestly, it was just incredible that we started a small group. We started doing blessing the community on that street. We saw people healed. We saw some incredible Holy Spirit things. And that the best thing for me was waking up one morning and someone had written, I won't say the word F off, you can imagine, bad word. I won't say it. Anyway, on our wall, graffitied it, because basically they were like offended by, God had just arrived on the street, basically, and it was incredible. And yet all those years of nothing, then suddenly God's kingdom came on that street, and there's so many stories. That's another story in itself. But, I look at a room like this, and, all of us, whatever is going on in our lives, we carry such potential. Despite ourselves, despite all our insecurities, uncertainties, things we mess up on, we are human. We're human and we're frail. It doesn't disqualify us. I always think, are we, though, trying to point towards Jesus, be more like him? But we stumble and fall and clumsy along the way. It's really okay. And, more and more I'm realising just the incredible privilege of carrying the Holy Spirit. And that just makes everything possible, everything possible. And, I look at a church like this, and I'm looking at all of you young people. That makes me feel old, which is not great, but amazing potential in this room. And the fact that you're even in church, I've got 4 daughters in their 20s, and a couple are in church, but a couple aren't. And I think the fact you're even in church, you're already taking a step in the right direction. And this is a community that can so impact this community, this city. It's an amazing city as well. And it's like, what is your part to play in that? And I think it's easy to think, oh, well, we'll come to church and it's great and that is great. But actually, what is it that in this bit of your story, what choices can you make to press into more of what God's got for you? And in a way, there's a room like this. You've got loads of changes going on. We heard about a couple of the church plants this morning, and that's great. But it's even better for you lot because there's places to fill. And I don't mean fill because they're needed. No. What is it that God's put in your heart that you say, do you know what? I might not be the finished article. I might not be perfect. But, I'm ready to kind of step up and step into something, and trust God. And trust that this is a fantastic training ground to then go out and take yourselves and your everyday, ordinary lives and take Jesus. But I just think, particularly in a church like this, there is an incredible opportunity for some of you guys here to go, do you know what? I'm not just going to, plod along. I'm going to kind of step into something and what that might look like. And I would say never despise small beginnings. Again, I think sometimes we see people, even someone like me standing up here and you go, oh, well, you're this. No, you've heard my story. It's very ordinary, nothing special. And yet it's like, it's the small things. And we start and are faithful with the small things, whether it's waiting well, serving well, taking risks well. Start with the small things, and it is amazing what God will do. And I'm going to play a video. And this is not a video to celebrate what I've done, so please don't hear that. But I look back and I look every bit of my story, up to the age of probably 30ish when we started at Trent. It was the first time that I really felt like my call, me as a woman, came out from behind Tom, and suddenly I felt the excitement of actually God's got something on my life for me to do. I'd never noticed it. I'd never realised it. I'd pressed it and pushed it down for so long. I thought that was normal. And it was suddenly God began to set me free and wake me up. And it's, from the age of 30, not without lots of ups and downs, but it's like being a revelation that, God can use me. He really can use me. And if he can, then that's... he can use anybody. And it was from that point, being believed in, having a go at things, finding people that actually wanted to draw the best out of me. And again, you guys in a church like this, find people who want to say, find someone you can latch onto and say, teach me. I'll do anything. I'll serve, And so this is one of the things, after a few years of the church getting going, I had the privilege of, I was nursing actually full time, and I just felt like God challenged me, would I give up my career? Now that's not right for everybody, in fact quite the opposite, we need people out in the workplace. But it was a huge challenge for me because the one identity I did have and felt very secure in was my nursing. I could put my uniform on and feel empowered because it was fake, basically. And I was good at what I did, and I'd done well with having 4 kids and going up the ladder and was earning good money. And I felt like God say, would you surrender that? So I was like, no. So there started a wrestle for about 6 months of just going, I can't, I will, I won't, And then, of course, God won, and I handed my notice in and just felt utter relief, actually. And, so then... it was literally a few months after that, so it was unto nothing. I just thought, I'm going to get stuck into church. This is a great church to be part of. And then we were looking for somewhere to store some clothes and bits and bobs. And Tom had to go and try and find a garage, something the size of a garage. And he found this building. We thought it was the size of a garage, and it was massive, an old derelict building. And I remember Tom coming home saying, I've found this amazing building. Do you want to come and have a look? So I was like, Tom, not another of your crazy ideas. You're exhausting. And he said, please, just come and have a look. So, okay, I'll have a look. Anyway, I turned up and went in, and the place was disgusting. It was dark, damp, smelly, spiders, horrible, just horrible. And it's never happened before, never happened since. But I walked into that building and I felt overwhelmed with excitement. I could see what it could be. I was like, oh my goodness, we could do that. We'd have clothes there. We could have a centre there. We'd have a coffee bar here. And I just got completely in this weird zone of excitement and passion and what we could do. Anyway, amazingly, the church had put some money aside. And so we said to John and Debbie, I said, I've really got vision to do something here. And they said, okay, why don't we give you 2 days a week to do something? And we got the keys a few months later. I remember walking in, and far from feeling excited, I just thought, what am I thinking? I haven't got a clue. I don't know how to even paint anything, let alone, do it up or start anything. But it has been incredible from that kind of small little opportunity. The church then completely got involved. I got all the small groups involved. And we've watched 15 years of hard slog, week in, week out, loads of ups and downs, but amazing what God has done through not just me, but a bunch of ordinary people in ordinary lives. So we'll just watch this.
The Arches is a practical resource centre for those in need in Nottingham, providing food, clothing, furniture, children and baby equipment and household goods. Since opening in 2001, we have seen thousands of people impacted by poverty for all kinds of reasons needing support. People from all walks of life, cultures and backgrounds, often in desperate need. We have heard incredible and moving stories of desperation, but also resilience, survival and hope, and have been able to play our small part in people's lives. As a team, we are constantly humbled and amazed and had our own lives impacted and challenged through the people we've met. We take referrals from over 100 agencies in Nottingham, but over the years we've built up relationship with and work alongside. We are wanting to become increasingly sustainable, so as well as everything we give away that's donated to us, we also have a shop and sell online to help support the work we do. As soon as people arrive at the Arches, we aim to create an environment of compassion, care and generosity, welcoming people with tea and toast, giving them time to chat through their personal situation and, if possible, giving them some choice of what it is they need. Many of the people who come to the Arches can feel isolated, and we've realised the importance of people being part of smaller group settings where they can find community and build genuine relationships. It's been a privilege and joy over the years to watch individuals, families, young and old, often arrive in one state, at times anxious and fearful, to then see them leaving feeling supported with provision of many of their practical needs, smiling, hopeful and heads held high. We have seen people get back into work and many others who are now an integral part of the team. The Arches was started with a few good people and a huge vision. We have an amazing team of volunteers, mainly from Trent Vineyard, who just work tirelessly and passionately, and in the process find a great sense of fulfilment and purpose, putting their faith into action through serving in many of the teams. At the core of all we do, our longing and desire is to demonstrate God's love in a practical way, through generosity, treating people with dignity and respect, supporting them as they build self-confidence and self-esteem, and empowering them to reach their potential. We long for people that come to the Arches to meet and encounter Jesus and watch him transform lives and inspire change.
So, that's kind of a bit of my story, but for all of you, everyone's story here is different. Everyone's got a unique calling, an anointing and a purpose in life. And we can't compare ourselves to others or for our journey to be like anybody else's. It's you doing your kind of business with God and then being a part of this amazing community and doing life together. I think, we need to learn to be secure in who we are. And that doesn't come overnight. I'm just moving into that now, and it's taken a long time, so it doesn't have to be rushed. I think, for those of you, particularly in your 20s, your late teens and 20s, it is a really hard time to balance kingdom and kind of the culture we live in. And my heart goes out to you all, really, because I see how difficult it is. I was chatting to one of the friends I've made at the gym, and he's 22. And I've been chatting a lot to him recently, and I was naive about some of the kind of normal things that culture kind of offers. Maybe different here, but, he was talking about Tinder and, it's just really easy and he can meet a woman. And I was trying to say to him, but do you realise if you make choices like that now, that will impact the way you can be intimate and kind of for the long term with somebody else, because you're not learning actually to do a real relationship. And he's like, oh, really? And we talked more, and he said, I'd never thought about that. And then I just said to him, oh, so are you doing loads of porn as well then? I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound. He went, He went, yeah. I said, how often? He said, well, whenever I can, most days. And, he's a great guy. He's educated. He's like, really, this is just... And he said, that's what we all do. So I said, oh, but do you realise? And I found some great stuff on pornography and how it's like the silent addiction and how destructive. And so again, we talked about, but this is going to impact. And when I said, what is it you really want? And he just said, I long to meet somebody for life and get married and have kids. And I was like... what about the choices now then to impact that? And I've been amazed because he's not, his parents actually are Christian, and he definitely had some sort of encounter in the past. And as we were talking, he said, you're the only person in my life saying this stuff to me. He said, everybody else around him is telling me this is okay. So I said to him, well, I challenge you. Why don't you abstain from, sex and Tinder and whatever for at least 3 months? He was like, 3 months? Oh, I never can do that. I said, well, I'll give it a go. I'm drying out. That's what he said. But anyway, I said, give it a go, give it a go. Anyway, he's managed it. And then the other day he messaged me and he said, I've closed my Tinder account down. And the same with pornography. He's really, it's like there's a hunger to have someone speak into lives. And we've now started, Tom and I, doing an alpha with him and a friend of his, not a girlfriend, but a girl. And it's just been amazing, their appetite for another way, a better way. And I think our culture offers a way that everybody thinks it's all right. And then I think almost we get a bit confused, like, is that okay? Then, oh. But actually, when we can speak in truth, if you like, suddenly it's like, it's a revelation. And already they're saying, like, oh, I feel different. I feel clean. And he actually said to me, I have to be honest, Helen, as I reflected back, I knew it was bad. I knew that something inside me just, it wasn't right. And so it's exciting. And I would say to you, in this culture, as hard as it is, and, it is a challenge, following Jesus is a cause to live for, it's a cause to die for, and us just being passionate. And it's not about being religious, it's about telling our stories, where we're at in our stories. And we don't know the end. And even if that means sometimes difficult things, I think people love authenticity. They love us to be real and not to be scared of that. I've found that the more I talk to our gym buddies who we've just so many not Christians, and then I'm honest and open, and they say to me, Helen, if that's what being a Christian is, I'm actually quite attracted to that because it's real. And I thought you were going to be this, and this. And it's like, no, I'm just me, And actually it's an attractive thing. So really encourage you with that. So I think as well, along the way, be secure in making mistakes. Please, it's all right. And, I hope that, and again, in this community, I know there's grace and love, and we have to keep learning that lesson. And every time I continue to make kind of mistakes along the way, I'm just learning more and more. It's about actually for us to experience grace again. Because if we can go so long thinking we've all got it sorted, what happens, we lose the gift of what it means to be loved and to receive God's grace. And then we are less generous and gracious to others. Because you think, well, I've managed to be really good and behave, why can't you? But actually, I think God brings brokenness again and again to say, or certainly in my own life, like, you need me, Helen. You need my grace, you need my love. And I'm like, yes, I do. I'm just, oh, God, it's so good. And then when I meet other people with all sorts of crazy life choices, I'm like, they need grace, they need love, just like I need it. We're all on a level playing field here. So as I finished, I just was reading this morning, and I just felt like for some people they needed to hear this again, of just knowing how wide and long and high the deep love of God is for each one of us, wherever we're at in our story, no matter how we're feeling. And it's just a small glimpse, hopefully enough to kind of just know that love. And it's this, that we should be able to, hold yourself in high regard, despite imperfections and limits. To be able to say, I'm worthy to assert my God-given power in the world. He's with us, he's in us. I'm entitled to exist. It is good that I exist. I have my own identity from God that is distinct and unique. I am worthy of being valued and paid attention to. I'm entitled to joy and pleasure. It took me years to realise that. And I'm entitled to make mistakes and not be perfect. And I think some of us need to kind of say those things in our hearts. So as I finish, I just would encourage you to think about where you're at in your story, to maybe reflect back and know that God is faithful. He really, really is. It doesn't always feel like it. It doesn't always look like it. But as you, certainly for me, as I look in my back mirror of my 51 years, I'm like, yeah, the story. God is faithful. We see it in the Bible all the time through the kind of different stories. And sometimes you just need to cling on to God is enough. He is faithful. And just think about, who's influencing you and who could you influence? Because the fact that you're all in this room says to me, you're going to influence people for good. What's going into you is good stuff. And I would encourage all of you, even if it's just one person that maybe isn't a Christian, decide just to pour some time and energy into them. And you will be amazed at the difference that could make. And if it's more than one, that's great. And so it's receiving, but also giving out. And then in that, you'll learn and grow from both kind of ends. So I think, I've said quite a lot there in the end, but I just encourage us as we're going, Helen's going to lead us in the Lord's Supper in a moment, but I just felt for some people as we went into the Lord's Supper, which is an amazing opportunity to just stop individually and just commit ourselves. For some people, it might even be making a choice today to say, I'm going to try this Jesus. I'm going to choose to follow him. For others, you just need to kind of realign yourself. You just know that your head's gone off a bit, your heart's gone off a bit, and you just need to realign yourself. And for others, it's, you just know you need to consciously make some choices that may be uncomfortable, but you know already. You don't need anyone to tell you, you know. And I think whatever it is, I just encourage you as you take the bread and the wine to do business with God tonight. Tomorrow's a new day, beginning of a new week, and who knows what's in store. And as I say, as a church, it's an exciting time for you. And there's just a sense that God has got a lot to do in Copenhagen. And you are the people. You're all leaders here in the sense that you're influencing somebody along the way in life, in work, at home, your kids, your spouses, your friends. And it's like, wow, what could happen? What could happen? And so I'm going to leave you with that.